Alright, guys. So, a very good evening, good afternoon, good morning to all of you. My name is Bharat, and welcome to InfoSec Train to our latest series of webinars, specially targeting to the leadership of the cybersecurity community in terms of Security Operations Center. So, welcome to the webinar for CISO Awareness Program in terms of SOC. So, today we are going to discuss about multiple different verticals of SOC and SOC. Blueprints from reactive to proactive approach. In that particular part, we will be basically starting with multiple different series of things and discussions, and it will be guys an open session, open table sessions. We will be understanding the problem statements, and we will be finding the appropriate solutions from them. So I'll start with my introduction up over here. I hope I'm loud and clear to all of you. Some of you guys might know me already, or for those who I'm new up over here, I'm into this field of information security from past 10 plus years, and I have been working into the technical side of security and moreover taking care of all the technicalities from offensive to defensive. So I started basically more of the offensive side, and from past 6 plus years, as of now, I am basically working into the defensive side of security, taking care of end-to-end SOC services, which includes any sort of implementation, designing, adminning, analysis of SOC services. So your digital forensics, incident response, threat intelligence, threat hunting, overall experience of cyber security, information security from the technical perspective, and gained over more of knowledge into the both of these particular fields, which are more useful for us. So that is guys pretty much about myself. Now I will be moving towards the slide, and we will be discussing about what we will be having in our this 2 days of program. So we have scheduled 8 to 10 today and tomorrow, Indian time. So let's get started. So our agenda basically for this particular session is going to be these. So we do have 2 days. So I have planned the agenda into two different parts. So we will be discussing first of all today what is SOC, why do we need it, traditional versus modern SOC. We'll take multiple use cases, we'll understand what are the must-have capabilities. We will have a Q&A session, and then we will be summing up our today's agenda. And tomorrow we will be basically talking about the increasing attack surface. We will be talking about like the current threat landscape. We will be talking about how we can prioritize our strategy, our architecture from the leadership point of view. We will be understanding all these particular pointers. So just be there, hop on, and let's get started. So Security Operations Center, guys, SOC. So it is basically a very well-known term nowadays in, I believe, in entire cybersecurity community. It is something which is a very well-known term. But can anyone basically go ahead and tell me a quick one-liner as per the management, what is basically the SOC? Or how do you find whenever you hear about the term SOC, what is your first perspective? So basically, shock. I'll just share my experience with all of you. So I guess, yeah, in 2021, I did a survey in one of the webinars just like this. With a survey participant strength was 1,000 people, and in that survey, I did ask that what is SOC, and then there were two options. The one was that it is basically a department in an organization which just takes care of entire cybersecurity as a central unit. And second was it's a software which just takes care of entire cybersecurity, entire information security, or our infrastructure's security, any particular software. But yes, of course, SOC is basically something which we can call it as a combination of softwares where are being used together in order to build the security. In that can be basically one of the major things are which is inside the SOC. SOC is not something which is a software, but there are multiple softwares which are working under the SOC. So we do have people, we do have process, we do have technology. When all these three things blends together with one central motive in order to secure our infrastructure, that is what we do call as SOC. So as digitalization is basically getting like the pace of digitalization has been increased, right? Our enterprise exposure is being basically more and more evolved and diversed, and not in just in terms of technology it's have been diversed, it has been diversed in terms of cyber attacks as well. I hope all of you do agree to this particular part. And with this modern like I would say with this sudden global shift that is basically towards remote working, right? After pandemic you might have seen mostly companies have adopted the hybrid infrastructure where the remote working is one of the essentialities of this particular era. So this has also have contributed immensely towards the enterprise challenges, especially in terms of security. So when we do talk about SOC, our traditional SOC operation centers, like security operation center, was mainly basically an monitoring and organizations network. But now, just monitoring an organization's network is no longer an acceptable protection. It's time to basically take a closer look at how the future of SOC basically looks like. So SOC it acts as a critical component for the organizations I would say cybersecurity strategy. It serves as a centralized hub where all the security professionals are working together in order to basically do multiple things. Prevent is not the only thing. Prevent is one of the first priorities. Apart from it, we do have monitor, we do have detect, we do have respond, and of course to mitigate our cybersecurity threats and incidents. So, as a leadership, when we do talk about the CISOs, the CIOs, the CTOs, or the SOC managers, they do play a crucial role in establishing the policies which do govern the entire security operation center, because they are the ones who are responsible for entire communication, entire strategies, entire policies which are happening in security operation center. So when we do basically have these particular role sets within our SOC, those are basically the representing face of security of the organization. So it plays a role in basically they CISOs basically plays the role I would say in overseeing and guiding these SOC activities to ensure the entire organization's assets, data, and operations basically remain secure. So the must-have capabilities, of course, SOC can include a number of capabilities depending on our motive. But in SOC, from the leadership perspective, there are few pointers which we can basically understand. The very first and very basic and niche part is defending against the threats. The SOC is basically acting as a first line of defense against the constantly evolving landscape of cyber threats. So CISOs basically has to see the SOC as the nucleus of the organization's proactive efforts to identify and neutralize the potential security threats, because those threats can harm the organization. Later down the line, we are going to discuss one case study where the absence of SOC basically have caused a big organization, a big security firm, a lot of damage. So what we can learn from them, we will be discussing on that part as well. So SOC, as I said, guys, it will be basically something which will be acting as a centralized unit within the organization where we will be having multiple different sets of skills of people. We will be having multiple different sets of technologies and multiple different established processes and procedures which will be overall aiding each of them in order to basically do one common thing, that is fulfilling a common goal, that is the security of the organization. So both when we do talk about SOC is basically a central, no more just a unit which will be just monitoring and will be doing the detections. So there is a lot more which we have observed in this last 4 years, which includes the capability of SOC to be increased to a next level. So we will be discussing about all these particular use cases. Let's move towards our next part over here. Let me take this particular part over. Since our threat landscape is evolving and becoming more sophisticated, right? And the one of the major reasons why do we need SOC is for our reactive security measures that are no longer basically able to protect our organization. So we need to take the things to a proactive approach, and that's where basically SOC comes into the picture, where the teams, the variety of tools, the variety of technologies collect, analyze, and respond to the security threats in real time, as well as they do have the capability of looking the entire data sets and doing the historical correlation in order to identify the patterns, the dips, and the spikes of our cyber security threats appearances. And since there is a saying that life is too short to learn from your own mistakes, so we have to learn from someone, we have to learn from others. So there can be multiple reasons why do we need basically the SOC in an organization. There can be n number of reasons why do we need SOC in an organization. The very first one, which I would like to say, is to detect and respond. So is there, guys, let's say being a CISO, you have been given an opportunity to have an investment of $1 billion and to secure the organization 100%. So do you think that is it a feasible option? So value of which our SOC will be able to provide will be will be considering on the basis of the ROI or the investment which organization is going to do. So no matter whether we do have budget of $1 billion to $10 billion, until and unless we do basically provide back the value or the ROI to the organization, a SOC can never be succeeded. So a SOC basically cannot work only on prevention, as I said few minutes back, because there is 100% security. There is no chance that 100% security any organization or any SOC can get. What best we can do is we can basically put most of our efforts in the preventive side, but not just only focusing on the preventive side. We can basically do one major thing, that is detection. What if you are not able to prevent your organization, there should be always a plan B in terms of detection. What if you do have the capability to detect the threats on time? So again, it's a win-win situation. And when we do talk about detection, there is one major thing which does comes, that is continuous monitoring. So the more you are able to monitor, the efficiently you are able to monitor, the better you do monitor, you will be able to detect on time. And since we are able to detect on time, we will be able to respond to threats quickly and efficiently. That will be helping our organization's motive to mitigate the cybersecurity threats at minimal. So SOC can help us to identify and respond to the threats much faster as compared to they do their on they could do on their own, because it reduces the risk of data breaches and security incidents in a very simple way, because it is a centralized unit where we are bringing entire of our data, we are bringing chunks of our data to one centralized location, and we are basically using that entire chunk of data to interrelate to each other to understand in a more better and more efficient way by correlating each and every different data sets together. So that's how basically detection and response can be one of the major things. Now, since you guys have seen that mostly organizations are spreading global. That means they do have their offshore offices, they do have their offices in more than one countries, they do have their work in more than one jurisdictions. So this brings one of the major needs for the organizations to have the SOC. That is your regulatory compliances, your security regulations. So many industries are subjected to strict security regulations, be it in a you are in a banking sector, be it basically you are in a IT service sector, be it you are in a healthcare sector. Regulations and are everywhere. And recently, if you guys are from India, you might have heard about today one of the data protection bill was being passed in Parliament just today itself. So that will be again one of the things which we will be having in our security infrastructure while we will be consuming, processing, analyzing the data. So, the very major factor which we always do try to secure is data. And when we do talk about securing the data, the very basic thing which comes to our part is data security. And data security is something which has to be standardized, and it has been standardized by with time with the help of these regulatory compliances. So a SOC can help the organizations to demonstrate the compliances with same those regulations, and it can help the organization to avoid costly fines which can be implemented if not being aligned with these particular compliances. The very third and important part, since ROI we have talked about in our last point. So, in order to reduce the cost of security, a SOC can help the organization by centralizing all the security operations and leveraging the economies of scale. And in benefit, not just basically it will be cost efficient, it will be basically helping us it will be helping us in more other ways. We will be having, since everything is being centralized, we will be having increased visibility. We will be having in terms of increased visibility, we will be having more idea about our security posture, which will be helping us to identify and mitigate the risk more effectively. It will be more improvised response time. Since everything is again together, incidents will be responded quickly, and it can help the organizations to reduce the impact and minimize the damages. Then we do have reduced risk of data breaches. First of all, I just want to know, do you guys basically are aware that data breaches basically are one of the major key factors which have happened in past 1 year? Whatsoever attack has happened, a lot of companies have faced data breaches and data leaks, and that was basically one of the major damage to the organization in last 1 year. So where a SOC can help in terms of data breaches is it can help us to reduce the risk of data breaches, and it can help us to constantly monitor for any sort of suspicious activity, be it from inside to outside, and quickly identify and respond to those particular threats. Then we do have uh, our proper increased peace of mind with working with the extended level of security. If there were separate departments in the organizations which were taking care of security, the proper channel, the proper communication has to set up in order to basically define the security of the organization more proactive, more time efficient. But when we do talk about SOC acting as a central unit, it can be basically something which can be handled by the team of experts with their core focus on the business activities, and where their core focus on the security at the very same time within the same department. So establishing SOC is highly recommended, and it is being considered as one of the more major critical factor, or SOC plays a more critical role within the organization to protect the organizations from the cyber threats. Now, as I said, life is too short to learn from your own mistakes, so we learn from others. So I would like to take one case study up over here, and the case study belongs to one of the very known IT security firm which provides us the access management services, that is Okta. So in January 2022, Okta, the identity management company, do you guys know that they were the victim of cyber attack that affected over 300 of their customers? I'm not talking about the only company, but 300 of their customers. The attack was being carried out through to gain the access to the Okta system, and it was being done via Okta's third-party vendor. And one of the very major reasons, do you know why this particular breach was happened, or not why this breach was happened, but one of the very major reasons uh, can be because Okta was not having SOC at that time of the attack. There was no established SOC within the Okta's infrastructure which could have basically detected the attack on time and would have stopped the attack on time. The breach caused significant disruption to the Okta's customers, and company lost millions of dollars in terms of revenue. So their third-party vendor Seattle, basically, which provides customer support services to Okta, they were infected, and via which Okta was being impacted. And more than three over 300 customers, Okta's customers, including some of the world's largest companies, the attacker were able to gain the access to the Okta system, and that too even for several weeks before they were being discovered. So do you guys know the dwell time? Everyone in the organization, everyone in the SOC, especially from the management perspective, in order to find out the ROI, they are looking that one of the very major things, that is to reduce the dwell time of the organization, because organization can anyhow face the cyber attack, can mitigate from the cyber attacks, but in case if organization is not able to minimize their dwell time, it will be one of the very major reasons that it will be affecting the organization for a very long run. So dwell time, for those who do not know dwell time is something which we, you can say, the time elapsed between the attack happened and the attack's detection. So when attacker attacked and when you were able to detect, the time difference between these two timeline, these two events is what we do call as dwell time. And one of the very major reasons organizations are looking in order to basically reduce the dwell time is because dwell time is something which is one of the more critical things for the organization. If attackers do attack and we are not able to discover those particular attacks on time, it can cause major damage to the organization as compared to a sophisticated cyber attack which organizations were able to detect on time, because the attacker, the more time attackers do spend in in our infrastructure, the more impact and the more loss of revenue it will be for the organization. So in case of Okta, it was dwell time was several weeks before they were discovered, and during this time the attackers have potentially accessed sensitive data from the Okta's customers, like all of their usernames, their passwords, their employee records, everything, because it was weeks time before they were being discovered. And what Okta did do was, in order to basically mitigate the impact of the attack, they basically investigated the attack. So Okta, since I mentioned they were not having in-house SOC for them, they hired a third-party firm to investigate the attack and to determine the extent of damage. Of course, they did notified all of their customers, they did strengthen their security postures, but it is one of the major use cases that why SOC is needed. And what is one of the major needs of SOC is that we can detect our attacks on time. And detecting attacks on time just does not only means to have proper tools and to have SOC set up in your environment. You need to be proactive in order to basically detect the threats at an early stage. So in order to basically improvise the security posture, they took the steps of implementing new controls, training their employees on the best security practices. And this case basically, as I said, it's a reminder that even most secure companies can be vulnerable to cyber attacks, and it is important for all the organization to have the strong security posture and to be prepared for the cyber attacks, because there is nothing which can be prevented 100%. I'm emphasizing on this term again and again. So we need to be prepared for the cyber attacks. That is, we need to excel into our incident response skills. Guys, see, security posture, it basically comes from the investment which we have done in three things of our organization, the three pillars. That is the people which we do have, the pillars of the organization, the process which we do have implemented, and the technology which we have with us. So when we do mix a blend of all these three things together, there is everything which is there in our possible reach, in our available resources which we can implement, which can have one motive or one goal, that is to secure our organization. That can be one of the strongest thing which you can build. So of course there can be tools which can detect on time, there can be basically tools which can give you the alerts, but detection is something which is very key, but it's not the only thing which you can invest in. So when I say you cannot only invest in prevention, when I say you cannot only invest in detection, so you might be thinking where we should go then. So that is where the proactiveness comes into the picture. Rather than basically sitting and waiting for things to come to us so that we do detect them, why do not we do go ahead and engage with the attackers? So that's where proactiveness comes into the picture in terms of we being going out in the wild, hunting for the attackers, hunting for our threats, which can cause the damage or a significant damage to us in future. So with this particular type of investment, there can be one of the strongest layer for us in terms of security. Make sense? So you guys might have seen, because like the reason proactiveness is the need of the era is because you might have seen generally when we do try to respond, right? Either we are too late in terms of our dwell time, which where the attackers already would have caused the significant damage to our organization, or either we are responding to the known threats which we have invested in our money in terms of tools or in terms of services from third party vendors. So when we do basically try to invest within our resources, available resources, when we do try to blend those available resources towards the more proactiveness, that's where the actual latest blueprint of SOC comes into the picture. So if SOC is not properly being configured or is not being properly set up, there are lots of risks which are available in the market. And few of the very common risk which I will mention up here is the very common one is ransomware. You guys might have seen ransomware attacks are becoming increasingly common, and SOC can basically help to protect from these type of attacks by proactively basically looking out for those particular attacks and protecting our organization beforehand. Attackers do try to attack us, rather than basically waiting to detect and respond a ransomware attack, we can increase our chances to fight against the attackers who will be basically doing the attacks. And you might have seen that nowadays organization, though it is very less, but nowadays organization have signed up together that there will be no paying to the ransom. But in the end, we do see that people do end up, or companies do end up paying to the ransomware attackers for in order to basically get their data back. But nowadays there is basically a flow which is happening in the market where people are less and less interested in paying out the ransomware attackers, and that is basically caused more I would say competition in terms of attackers as basically not everyone is going to be paid with the ransoms these days, and there are petitions, there are movements like no ransom.org and things like that are going on for a long time, but they have picked up a pace now onwards. After ransomware, the another increased attack which can be to the organization, which can cause a significant and a immediate damage, that is denial of service attacks. So denial of service attacks basically, since attackers would try to basically take over our systems. Of course, denial of service attack, there are a lot of preventions which can basically either prevent them completely or else at least detect them and give us a tip of that something like this is going to happen and we can stop this. But in case if it is not properly being set up, denial of services can be one of the attacks which could cause a major disruption to the organization's regular operations. And third thing, which is basically taking the hype, that is insiders. So the malicious insiders of the organization are more dangerous. I would say the most dangerous one as compared to the external threats, because they do already have access to your assets, and they do have things in their hand, and they can basically dispose, they can do the attacks which can cause the more significant damage to the organization. And no matter what sort of budget we do have, sometimes against these threats none of those security controls can work. So SOC can help us by monitoring the employee's activity, by detecting the suspicious behavior, and of course, behavior analysis have played a very good role in order to basically identify these particular types of threats and responding to these threats before it could lead to the significant loss of data or financial loss to the organization. And last one, which I will say, the major common risk if SOC is not properly there, since humans basically are the most common point of error within the organization. So the one of the very major errors which humans do is phishing attacks, which they do fall for is phishing. No matter what sort of technology you do have, no matter what sort of tools you have implemented, whether you do have a military grade security or not, if your human resource is not being aware and trained of, then there is definitely a loophole which can be compromised within your systems or within your infrastructure, and that can be taken over by the attackers in point of times. And it can be basically, the attack can be launched internally rather than coming externally to us. So phishing attacks are quite common and they have increased apace. And this era, you guys might have heard about deep fakes a lot after this particular chat GPT and this particular things have been come up. In last few weeks or months, I would say deep fakes has basically taken a lot over these particular internet, taken a lot over on this internet. So there was basically, there were multiple cases which have been reported that organizations have lost millions of dollars where the deepfakes have basically taken over. The sophisticated AI audio and video technology have taken over, and attackers basically are using this deepfake phishing as an emerging attack vector, which could concern for the senior level management like CISOs, like you guys. So basically, these particular things are available in the industries. Of course, for these particular defects, there are lots of risk which are being possessed in the enterprise. Like attackers basically try to trick the content, like phishing. Earlier, they were doing the sophisticated phishing attacks where they were tricking the users in order to do the let's say unauthorized payment or to volunteering sensitive information to the attackers or things like that. But if I do talk about deepfakes being used with phishing attacks. Basically, there was a company back in UK. It's an energy-based firm. They have basically wired, I guess, $243,000 to the attackers instead of basically doing that particular transfer to their company, because attackers used a voice spoofing software and they impersonated the head of the company, like head of the firms of the parent company, and they basically asked them to make the transfer to their head company, and it was basically being done by the child company to the parent company's head. So like this, there are lots of cases which are there in the market, and the only thing which can basically help us is train, train, and train. So security leaders now, after investing into tools, into technologies, it's a very high time to train your professionals, because security controls can be put it in place, but we do know and we do have a history of controls being bypassed. So now you need to make your end users aware of these particular things, of these emerging attack vectors, through maybe ongoing trainings, or to take more security awareness trainings, or to basically have things like competitive and let's say rewarding cultures to keep them fresh and top of the mind. So these are basically like few of the things which can basically possess the risk. As I said, phishing was the last one to discuss among the list over here. So these were guys few of the things, not just basically Okta. There are lots of companies which, because SOC was not there, they have possessed a lot of disruptions into the organization. I do remember there was one more, which was a clothing retailer, Old Navy. So they were basically having 100 million of their customers data breach, and it was being caused by vulnerability in the company's website. And they were not having SOC at the time of the breach, which resulted into the attack, and it took them several weeks to identify and contain the breach. And it cost them millions of dollars in terms of fine and remediation cost. Similarly, the world's largest meat processing company, JBS USA. So they were also basically being a victim of a ransomware attack that forced the company to shut down their operation for several days. And the attack was so significant in terms of disruptions that it basically disrupted the entire global meat supply chain and costed millions of dollars in lost revenue for the company. Again, they were not having SOC at that time, and it took basically them several days to identify and contain the breach. So you can see that no matter from which industry your organizations do belong, from an e-commerce retailer to a I would say a cybersecurity firm like Okta, or to be basically a manufacturing or a food processing company. If you do have digitalized environment, if you do use systems, then SOC is basically one of the major and must need of the hour these days. So this was guys, why do we need SOC? In detail, we have discussed multiple pointers which can help us to identify why do we need SOC. Now we will be talking about the evaluation of our SOC in terms of traditional and modern SOC. Since upgrading is not an option, but it's a necessity of the organization these days, and these things basically can be helping the organization in order to basically evolve from what they have done in past, and in order to basically get more and more things. Since our traditional SOC were typically reactive, that means we were waiting for an attack to happen before we do respond, and we do rely on the manual processes and the tools. Mostly we were relying upon the tools to analyze our security data, which basically was not something is not something I would say useful in this particular modern era for us to detect and to respond to the threats quickly. So as you can see the image on the right hand side over here, we were just started with knock, where we were taking care of entire network, we were monitoring the traffic, we were looking out for anything suspicious in our traffic. Then we evolved and we get into the SOC, where we do took the security operations as a separate part, not the SLA of the knock, and we did investigated upon all of these particular security aspects of the organization. We did talked about multiple various things in terms of security up over here. We did plan in order to collect all of our data. Now, a system can generate thousands of logs, and if the system is connected to a network, then it can generate thousands of the thousands of logs. So all those logs, a person sitting on an individual system or a device and monitoring them was difficult for us. So we did basically collected all the data together and we developed SOC. Now with SOC, we have developed AI and ML in order to basically do the historical correlation to understand the patterns, to give us the user behavior information and all these particular parts. So threat intelligence, basically, in a very layman term, when I do understand threat intelligence or I do try to make the understand threat intelligence, I can say that it can be the food for the SOC, which SOC can basically ingest, can digest, and can basically learn upon, and can help us to in order to basically do the better detections and better protections for us time to time. So when we do talk about any sort of SOC where there is no threat intelligence, that can be one of the SOC where it can never be proactive. So when we do use threat intelligence, one of the major reasons to use threat intelligence is to become proactive at first place, to basically understand what is happening around us in our industry, how attackers basically are trying to get more motivated, get more skilled, and what sort of sophisticated attacks they are carrying out, what sort of tools they are using, what sort of tactics they are using, techniques they are using, what sort of infrastructure they do have. When we do try to learn all of these things, we can basically then analyze those attackers in our terms, and we can always try to basically look for those particular attackers who are very likely to attack our organization, and we can always monitor them proactively before they would have done any sort of attack over our infrastructure. That can help an organization to be taking a very first step of proactiveness. And when we do talk about modern SOCs, as compared to the traditional SOCs, they are proactive. They are not just only reactive, means that they can take the steps in order to prevent the attacks that are happening in the first place. Plus, they can use multiple tools like latest automated tools and technologies to monitor and to analyze our data in real time. And this allows them to basically detect and respond to the threats quickly, efficiently, and proactively. So this is what we do have is SOC with threat intelligence, and then there is SOC with SOAR, security orchestration, automation, and response. Now, this is something which is our topic, which we will be discussing bit more in detail in our tomorrow's agenda. But yes, it is something which is very important as we do understand. Now, since there are basically human oriented services or human engineered services which were going on from a point of time in in our SOC, right? From a long point of time in our SOC. But now the next wave, I would say, of this SOC or the modernization of SOC, it will definitely bring up the engineered platform engineered solutions. So of course, human are the essential part of SOC. So we are not talking about the replacement of SOC. We will be always needing a human brain or a human mind to sit upon it. But platform engineered solutions or platform engineered services where we can take the level 2 task and activities and we can basically automate that entire task and activities. This is where we are proceeding with our orchestration, automation, and response. Any sort of repetitive task, I believe, should be automated in order to save more time and in order to basically give more time to our analyst to look into the things which might be more concerning or more useful for the organization. So modern socks are of course becoming increasingly popular as organizations basically recognize the need of proactive measureness, right, and the need of proactive approach to the security, and modern SOC can help the organization to reduce the risk of cyber attacks by improving the cybersecurity posture, by becoming proactive and saving huge amount of money, and basically making it best possible to give it to your ROI. Now, one of the timeline creation is one of the very basic part of your and the very first part of your incident response, where you do create the entire time attack timeline, where you do understand what happened at what time and where it was being proceeded to the next part in the very next time, uh, very next minute. So timeline creation, yes, it is one of the important parts. So it's all about preparedness, as you are saying, that when we are prepared fully in terms of our people, in terms of our tool, in terms of our process. So that is basically one of the proactive approaches we can take. So, in terms of preparedness, guys, there can be several things which can be included. For example, the assets in your organization, every asset basically should be having one should like we should have the entire detail of those assets, including the patch details, including the update details, or to whom that asset belongs to, the identity of that asset should be known. So, in case if anything is happening with that asset, we can immediately identify to whom it does belongs, and to we can basically respond to those particular activities. Now that is again a part of preparedness in terms of proactiveness. So what apart from preparedness, guys, we can do to become more proactive? This is all preparation, that you're preparing your infrastructure, you're preparing your tool, you're preparing your people to be ready. See, attackers are getting more and more sophisticated. So even they do know that we will be prepared with the things. So they do always have anti-forensic techniques where they will be trying to basically destroy the evidences. They will try to delete the logs, or they will try to manipulate the timestamps of our data, which can again cause multiple things. They will try to disable the things. So what we are preparing for can be basically bypassed by the attackers. But when we do talk about the proactiveness, the real proactiveness basically comes right before any sort of attack happened within the organization, when you have a proactive team which is actively assuming that your organization is already compromised and is looking for the threats within the organization. That is what we do call as the actual proactiveness. A dedicated team who is not basically sitting on threat detection side, but alternatively is being sitting on the threat hunting side. So threat hunting is, guys, something which you can say the most proactive and a human iterative approach, where we can basically call off apart. I'm saying a level up than threat intelligence, because threat intelligence is just as simple as someone's reactive is becoming your proactive. You are collecting the intel from your vendors, right? Now vendors are already basically being reacted on that intel, identified it, and they are sharing it to you. So someone's reactive is becoming your proactive. So I'm saying a level up then threat intelligence can be basically threat hunting, where you have a dedicated team which can basically look and identify the threats right before they would be right before any tool would have detected those things. So let's say there is an APT group. Now you all do know that APT groups are very known in order to basically attack in terms of persistence, right? They are very known to do the attacks which are long term attacks, and attacks which basically are not detected quite easily. So detecting an APT group via with the help of a tool, that's merely impossible. So what are the things, guys, which you would have implemented in your environment to detect the APT threats? So definitely that is one of the parts, but you know we cannot basically rely on the attacker's infrastructure detail, be it their IP, URL, domain. It's quite easy for them to change. So there is one thing which we can focus is we can focus on the attacker's TTPs, their pattern of attack. Because attackers are just human like us, right? We all humans are creature of habits. Now what if all of a sudden by tomorrow someone says you that you have a different role, you have a different team to lead, you have a different work to do, you have to wear a different dress, go to a different office, do a totally different type of work. So will that be easy for you to adapt the change? So it won't be easy for us to adapt the changes, and since it won't be easy for us, similarly it won't be easy for attackers because they have to brainstorm the entire attack life cycle. Again, they have to plan for new tools, they have to plan for new techniques, which can be frustrating for the attackers, right? So that's why we can do a long-term damage on the attackers when we do basically identify the TTPs of the attacker. That is the tactics, techniques, the procedures the attackers do use, the pattern of the attacker, the way how do attackers work, the way how do attackers attack, including their tools, their techniques, what they do perform. So this is one of the ways where we can detect the attackers or APT groups. That is something which is my perspective to detect APT groups. We cannot just only rely on the infrastructure details. With infrastructure details, we should always do go ahead and focus on the APTs. And the one-stop shop which is available to focus on the APTs is MITRE ATT&CK framework. So to operationalize MITRE ATT&CK framework, I have seen lot of SOC which have not operationalized MITRE ATT&CK framework. When I do say operationalizing MITRE ATT&CK framework, it's not just only uh, identifying the techniques and mapping it to your alerts. It is a lot more than that, where you can go ahead and map your data to the attack framework and then find out the tactics and techniques and then identify the attacker on the basis of the tactics and techniques and then basically monitor on that particular APT group. So APT hunting is altogether a different thing, a different story, which can be there in terms of threat hunting, which can help us to detect the APTs. Not just APT hunting, we do have network hunting, we do have endpoint hunting. We can look for everything. So my perspective in terms of proactive approach, as I said, the most proactive approach, threat hunting, can be basically done on the basis of assumption. Let's say a person like a CISO, like you guys, you are aware of your organization's infrastructure, so you can always assume for your critical assets, being situationally aware of your environment, you can basically always assume that your system is already being attacked by the attackers, and that particular attack is already bypassed all of your controls, and none of your security tools have detected that particular attack. So when you do this particular part, it becomes more proactive. It becomes more easy for you. Now all you need to do is create a hypothesis on basis of which you can basically assume, on the basis of your assumption you can create a hypothesis, and on the basis of that hypothesis you can test your system, you can test your logs, you can test your data. That might basically give you the sign of an attack at a very early stage where your tool might have missed to detect that attack. So that is one way of doing the using the proactive approach in order to basically see entire SOC. Basically it's combination of red and blue, right? But when someone asks me that threat hunting is a red team activity or a blue team activity, it's definitely a red team activity. A person doing the threat hunting should have knowledge of red team plus blue team. So he should be knowing forensics, he should be knowing incident response, he should be knowing threat intelligence. These all three comes from defensive side. He should be knowing vulnerability assessment, he should be knowing penetration testing, and he should be knowing adversary emulation. That comes from red team side. When you combine both of these things together, these skill sets together, there is a hunter who is being born, and hunter basically looks out for the threats within the organization. Now generally people do get confused it with penetration testing. In pen testing we do find the vulnerabilities, we do identify them proactively, and we do stop them. That is correct. But over here we are not looking for the vulnerabilities, we are looking for the threats. When we are identifying the threats within our system proactively, that is threat hunting. When you are identifying the vulnerabilities, that can be vulnerability assessment. So definitely it's a red team activity, but it comes under the major umbrella of blue team side. because the skills basically does have both, and I would say it's a perfect purple teaming activity rather than completely being blue team, completely being red team. It's a perfect purple team activity, and it does have basically the approach of proactiveness, where you can look and identify for the threats in a well advanced manner, depending on the expertise of the human who will be performing the threat hunt, and you can identify those threats and resolve those threats before they would have attacked, or the impact of that attack was being major in your organization. Right now, if you're having a shock and you're not having a threat hunting, you're majorly missing out in terms of proactiveness. And you're even right now in this modern era, you're having a traditional shock. It can be easily get by a product, a tool. I can deploy a tenable Nessus, and that tool can detect all those things and give a proper sophisticated reports to the executives like you. But what is the use of that? It is a known database, right? What about the unknown ones? We
Correct,
cannot
correct.
just sit and rely upon the known threats or the known vulnerabilities. We have to identify the unknown ones. And in order to do so, threat hunting is something which has to be implemented. So after this meeting, I would say definitely talk to your vendor and ask them that how they can perform threat hunting. Now, guys, as I said, what can be more than threat hunting? So, since I have worked in this particular segment a lot from a long time, I have identified there can be one more approach which can be more proactive than threat hunting. That is threat modeling. Now, instead of me sitting in our environment, identifying the threats within the environment without any alert, of course, I can basically even look at the design, right? Let's say you are implementing an internal application or an internal tool. At the very initial phase of that application's design, where you can identify the threats, you can look for the threats, you can identify that the working of that particular model will basically have these particular risk. For example, let's say you are taking an input from the user from the web or from the internet. Now that input, how it can be sanitized, how it can be secured. So blend of DevSecOps, development security operations, and threat modeling is something which can be more proactive in the very initial phase of your applications, that is designing and development. So threat modeling is one of the exercise, and again MITRE ATT&CK framework can help you in terms of threat modeling. So threat modeling, you can basically follow multiple different threat modeling activities. Threat modeling, I would say we do have Microsoft Stride, we do have Octave, we do have Pasta. Multiple of them are there.
Dread.
Strike is there, Dread is there. So these are all threat and modeling models, I would say, threat models which can be used in order to identify the threats in the very niche phase of your design. So now you can have a person with a skill set who can sit on this particular infrastructure and just look at the design of your infrastructure and can identify the threats. On the basis of that, this input can be given to your hunting team. Hunting team can carry out the hunts on the basis of the threats which can be available as per the design, and definitely there can be some unknown loopholes which we can identify, unknown threats which we can identify before they are being realized by the attackers. Now see, your entire team is working on the proactive side, a different dedicated setup for the proactiveness. Typical SOC analyst doing incident response or doing forensics or doing, I would say, threat intelligence. They cannot basic. We cannot expect that particular workforce to do this type of work. If they can do, definitely there should be a different dedicated department which can help them to basically look at the more proactive side of the organization. So you might be thinking, as in terms of ROI, how much it will be costing, and will it be basically helping us with those particular sort of threats which can help us. So there are two things. Threats, attackers will anyway attack your organization. They will be inside your organization. So proactiveness can only help you to basically reduce time in terms of identifying the attacks, which can definitely save your cost because you can automate many of those traditionally performed tasks which were being performed manually, and you can basically scale your team in terms of capabilities which can be proactive and reactive both. So it can basically help you as a I would say decision maker. It can help you in order to basically invest in the new SOC as they grow. So you can invest in extended capabilities, expanded capabilities of the people, not just only in terms of detection response, but proactiveness. And with proactiveness, definitely there will be return on investment, but it has to take time in order to basically become a mature enough in order to give you the ROI. So if you do have a mature SOC, that means a SOC which has crossed 5 years, I would say now is the time to deploy the full-fledged proactiveness. I am talking about the perspective in terms of modern SOC, in terms of proactiveness. So what we were performing traditionally, that is not something which we have to stop doing, but with that we have to adapt the proactiveness. So setting up the honeypots, definitely that is one thing. It includes it is basically one of your designing phase, right? When you will be designing your environment, you will be basically definitely setting up these particular areas where you will be luring the attackers, so you will be baiting the attackers to get in. So setting up the honeypots, it's a proactive measure, and definitely it has to be part of modern SOC. And when we do talk about these things, it can be at the very much phase of the preparation, when you are
Mm-hmm.
preparing for the incidents to detect, or when you are preparing for the attackers, or any sort of attack to detect, there you can put these particular honeypots or any sort of tools which can basically detect the attackers or can give us the alerts if there is anything happening. Traditional honeypots, I'm not talking about that. In modern SOC, if you want to have a modern honeypot, now that honeypot can be created in style, and that style basically can include multiple different things, especially decoy. So decoy is one of the major things which I have seen a lot of companies have implemented. Now you will never know, since like attackers are also doing this, so we can use the same technology to deceive them, right? So now people are basically creating LinkedIn profiles, even considering them as a SOC or as a security professional of the company, and those are just decoy profiles. Now they are
Yep.
having a decoy email address, decoy identity, decoy people, then their decoy system, then their decoy data inside the system, then their decoy network. So they are basically putting out fake profiles out in their infrastructure, and they are basically waiting for people to interact to those particular profiles in order to pull out the data. And those profiles are being trained with these particular AI MLs in order to basically lure them more and to give them some data which they might think it is useful, but a deception technology in the background is working that will give the alert to the SOC team in real time. So that is something which can be a evolved version of honeypots. Though our last topic for today, basically, though there can be lots of points, and those lots of points can have lots of things, but I believe I have covered. So far, I have covered majority of the things which could have been included. So I'll just keep the must-have capabilities for a SOC in 2023. So we are not limited to these points. If you want me to add on, definitely the list has been a very long one, but I have kept the most common ones, and we have talked about the pointers, most of the pointers which are not in this list already. So ingestion. So as I said, someone said up over here, I believe Mr. Rahman, you did said right that if you want the tool to help, you need to give the tool those logs, right? So
Yes, yes.
all data is security relevant. There are basically people who do think that what we will do of this particular type of log, let's not push this log, let's save some space, right? So or let's save some time. They do basically ignore that particular log set. So tire not guys that all data is relevant to the security, right? All data is security relevant, I would say. Data is the oxygen that gives life to a SOC, right? And all of your analytics and algorithms to breathe on it. So the very most important ability or capability of a SOC is to ingest the data from any source, any source. So whatsoever device you do have in your environment, whatsoever tool you do have in your environment, whatsoever setup you do have in your environment, be it structured, unstructured, collect all the data to one centralized location. That is the very first requirement and must have capability of a SOC, because SOC can have only eyes on the things which he is having under his umbrella. SOC is having under his umbrella, under its own umbrella. So if there is no data coming towards the SOC cannot guarantee in order to protect that particular data. The very first thing is ingestion. The very next important point is detection. Detect. So once the attack has happened, or attacker has, once the attack has or event has entered the system, so SOC should have capability to detect the attack, right? Now this is where your dwell time basically have to be reduced in terms of detecting the attack. You all do know that for an event there are four phases: true positive, false positive, true negative, false negative. So false positive is something which always can be fine tuned, right? We can minimize the false positive. We can always fine tune the false positive. True positive is something which we always want to achieve, right? That's our basically goal, which will be a perfect ROI for the organization. But false negatives, true negative is the state generally where we do our, but false negative is something which we always want to avoid. That means the attack happens and we are not being alerted. This is something which every SOC would like to avoid. So if an attack happens or if an event has happened, it should be detected within your SOC, and the SOC should have ability to detect the event, right? So in this case, basically the detection will be focused on the event, or it will be different from the traditional solutions. Let's say it can be focused on a particular file or a network traffic. So a SOC should have correlation rules or combination of correlation rules. Not just correlation rule will have help, guys. With those correlation rules, your machine learning and analytics are quite important. Not just only these ones, but other things can be also be there. These are just to name a few, are quite important to basically detect the attacks, right? So I would say at a given point of time, there should be basically engineering, detection and engineering in such a way in your SOC that it will be able to at a given point of time correlate every data with every data set within the SOC, and can basically try to basically understand the entire scenario or situation what would have happened, and then basically can give the alerts on the same basis. So this is what detection can or detect can help us. Then the very third part is predict. Now a very simple example, you all do have your mobile phones. In your mobile phones there is a weather app, right? The weather app is able to predict that it is going to rain or not, isn't it? Or it does predicts the temperature. Now imagine the same thing, that you get an alert 30 minutes before you discover a security event. So what, imagine what that could do for your SOC. The ability to predict that events or the ability to predict the security incidents can help you or help your SOC to proactively escalate those incidents to the appropriate responder, or to, let's say, streamline the response with a predefined SOP, isn't it? So there are lots of emerging predictive technologies that hold a lot of promise, and those provides basically an early warning just using the precursors or indicators of a large attack which can happen before, and beforehand it will give you the alert. A very simple example I can give you is a network scan, a port scan activity. So let's say in your basically logs there are basically series of events where there is one IP which is trying to communicate to one IP in your environment, but it is trying to make a connection to each and every to all the 65,535 ports, or let's say to most common 1000 ports. It is trying to like one IP A is trying to make the connection to IP B in your environment, and for IP B it is going for port 80 also, port 25 also, port 443 also, port 21, 22 also, 53 also, 3398 also, 445 also. So just IPA is trying to communicate to multiple ports. So what it will be assigned, what it suggests, what sort of activity it is. It's a port scan activity, isn't it? Like they have done the port scan, they might have the details, they might basically take one of the known vulnerabilities and can get insight. So that's a precursor, right? Which can basically indicate of a future attack. So what if you do get the alert and you try to basically block that particular IPA in your environment? So that can be one of the easy ways to understand the predict part, right? So that is guys what we do have as predict. Though we do have a dedicated topic of cyber automating cyber, but automate is one of the parts, right? Automation is one of the newer technologies to help the SOC analyst. Now, do you think that automation can completely, what's your perspective? Can automation completely remove the human resource from the part, or can completely remove the SOC analyst and their helps? Is that possible? So, as said, as I earlier said, right? One thing, there are a lot of things where automation cannot take over fully. I can basically discuss about it for an hour. We can find out more things, but one of the things which I do know is threat hunting, right? As I said, threat hunting is basically a human iterative approach. So when I say human iterative approach, that means that it is not something which can be replaced by an automation tool. Now you will be saying that, but you might have seen the companies or in your company threat hunting is automated. Someone will definitely say it. I do know that automation is different from the automation which we are talking about. Let's say you as a human, you are doing threat hunting, and once you have done the successful threat hunting, that successful hunt you can convert into an analytics, and that analytics you can run against your data set every day, every week, every month as per your SLAs, right? But until and unless a hunt is successful, you won't be able to basically automate it. And hunting generally comes from the intelligence of the humans, right? And intelligence of the humans basically does evolves with their experience, with their past experience, with the situational awareness, that means the assets which are around them, and with of course threat intelligence. Combining all these three things together, threat intelligence, then situational awareness, and then say, own experience, it basically makes it more human centric approach than I would say an automated approach. So that's where automation cannot take fully, but yes, automation can be useful, right? If we do basically put it in correct place, automation can be useful to cover up the repetitive tasks. Like we can create playbooks which can accelerate the investigation, which can already do the work which we would have done. We would have gone to virus total, get the report. So enrichment part, automation can help collect the data, put it in a file, so that once I will come to that file, I can analyze that file directly, right? So investigation, enrichment, containment, remediation, these can be automated, but investigation part, hunting part, these cannot be fully automated. There is no way it can be fully automated. And if it has been automated, there will be ways to bypass them, right? So a SOC definitely should have automation capabilities with a mixed blend of their human resource. So with automation capabilities, SOC can basically handle more events, because the processes that used to take 30 minutes earlier, that might not now be done in just 40, 60 seconds, right? And it is basically the evolution of SOC, right? Automation is no longer a choice. It's a I would say indispensable tool, isn't it? So automate is one of the necessary thing, And when it comes to automation, this point comes orchestrate. Orchestration, if I do basically try to add, let's say you do have purchased dozens of products, right, within your organization or within your SOC to power it, right? Now, all of these tools have a useful purpose, and all of these tools, behind these tools, purchasing these tools, you do have a motive to add to your defense, isn't it? But not all of them basically can be updated at the very same pace where attackers are getting updated or evolving, right? So it cannot match the speed of evolving threats. So the product which our SOC basically uses to hunt, right? Those products needs to keep a pace, and that pace can be basically done. These days we do have API driven world, right? So this is where orchestration comes into the play. It basically lets you plug in and connect every component that's inside and outside of your SOC, right? So something you have to take from outside to inside of your SOC and then give it to your outside, then bring it back to your inside after processing. You no longer have to basically open new tabs or use a separate point of solution to log in to every product, right? You can eliminate the process of copy paste from different solutions. You can simply, you do have the ability to orchestrate your products and remove the overhead, reduce the workload, and analysts can simply focus on their meaningful task, right? For example, if you do have IP, now you need to verify it on virus total, then you need to do a reputation check. On the basis of the reputation check, you need to run it in the hybrid analysis. And after running into the hybrid analysis, put it over a report and send it across to your SOC lead, right? So if an analyst have to do this work, they would be basically this type of work we can orchestrate. We can arrange it in sequence and we can basically orchestrate this entire work, right? So orchestration is also one of the must-have capabilities of SOC and recommend. Of course, at this point in threat identification process, right? We have discussed a lot of things through several levels in terms of like intelligence, hunting, modeling, right? So which can basically power our SOC, right? So don't you think that it would be great that if a platform could tell the analyst what to do next? Generally there are tools, right, which gives us the recommendations. If this happens, do this, then this happens, do this, right? So modern SOC can do these things by making a recommendation, right, where you will be having a playbook in a form of individual actions. Let's say if I'm talking about the management perspective, that you can deploy a solution which can basically help the analyst to decide whether he has to choose this path or this path. If he chooses this path, further he will be going through this thing, and in the end it will be resulting this. If he chooses this path, it will be ending this result over here, right? So recommended guide or recommended path, what to do next, can help the analyst to basically understand. Like it does helps in two basic ways. It teaches your new analyst what to do when a similar threat arises again and again, and gives your experienced analyst a sanity check or a reminder of what to do, right? So recommendation is something which is a add-on skill which you can have, which can have a quality, which can give you a quality work in terms of your SOC services by your team. Then we do have investigate. Of course, this is basically where automation and human resource always do fight, right? Mostly I have seen companies where 90% of tier 1 analyst work has been automated or will be automated in near future. So what happens to all that work? Of course, it required detailed, precise human analysis to take it to the last mile, right? 90% can be automated, but 10% of course human resource will be required. And as a intuitive security tool, basically your organization should have these type of tools that can help the human analyst to have the ability in order to basically investigate and help them prioritize what needs to be investigated, right? Like you will be of course now also you will be having, and in future you will be having a SOC where mostly L1 task of reputation check, DNS interrogation, it will be automatically done, right? But what should be done after this? You can have an investigation skill of your human resource which can guide them further what to do next after that particular activity. Then there is collaboration. So collaboration, that SOC is basically a coordinated collaboration. Nothing in SOC can work independent. It requires three things: coordination, communication, and collaboration. So nothing can be dropped. Events have to be comprehensively processed, and teams have to basically be on basically ChatOps capabilities. They do need ChatOps capabilities or ability to collaborate or to connect the tools, connect the people, connect the processes and automation so that they can have a transparent workspace, right? So collaboration is one of the needed part because one team cannot basically do end-to-end work. They will be needing the help of the another team and response of the another team in order to investigate or close for a particular certain case, right? So this is one thing which is required, that is collaboration. Of course, managed cases, incidents happen everywhere, right? Even when you do your best to prevent yourself, right? You will be having incidents which will be happening. And what's important for us is that when the incidents happen, what we do. That is something which is more important rather than focusing only on prevention, right? So incident response is one of the major skills. With this, all of your security teams should be armed with necessary ways and necessary tools to basically manage the response process, right? So they should have the response plans, they should have the established workflows, they should have the established procedure of, let's say, evidence collection, communication, documentations, timelines, everything. So case management is one of the important parts, which is a must-have capability in SOC, because if we do not have, when incident happen, in our response time will definitely will increase in case if we do not have a proper case management setup. And then guys, report. You can't manage what you can't measure, right? I believe all of you being at the leadership level, you will basically agree to this part, right? You guys better know the importance of a report. What is not in report cannot be managed, right? So you cannot manage what you cannot measure, right? So since in the very first part in the ingestion I said data is important, right? And that data's output, right? Data driven, we live in a data driven world, and security is no different, isn't it? So that's why all all aspects of security process needs basically a reporting mechanism, right? Or reporting tools that can help us to see what's performing and what is not, right? So we can accurately measure where we are and where we want to go. And on the basis of that, we can basically create our matrices. On the basis of then ROI can be discussed. Decision making can be done by the management, and we can present what sort of ROI we have brought out with the existing available resources. So reporting is one of the important part, and it is basically one of the very niche skill which should not be added in must have capabilities, but I have added because if you do lack on this, then definitely it's a static process. We cannot be improvised. Reports are most important way to get improvised, right? So these are guys the must have capabilities of your SOC.